Square Enix announced its participation in the upcoming E3 2021 event not too long ago, but like most other E3 participants, the developer didn't announce what topics it had in store for the presentation. Most future viewers reasonably assumed that the studio would simply use E3 to update fans on the development of the numerous Final Fantasy projects it already revealed, such as Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy XIV, Endwalker. However, a new rumor suggests that Square has more waiting in the wings. Over on Reset Era, popular industry insider Naftra claimed that Square Enix is preparing another major Final Fantasy announcement to go along with its expected updates. While listeners should take all rumors with a grain of salt, including this one, Naftra does have a history of successful claims that lend this rumor credence. For instance, Naftra predicted most of the main reveals for Sony's first PS5 showcase, including Square revealing Final Fantasy XVI as a PS5 exclusive. That said, even Naftra admits that fans should take their statements with a grain of salt. They don't know Square Enix's exact E3 schedule, and are only basing their guess on the knowledge of all of the games Square currently has in development, how far along they are in that development, and their target release dates. However, should their guess be right, Naftra thinks that Square will unveil yet another PS5 exclusive Final Fantasy title at E3 as well as a cross-gen IDOS title. It's hard to imagine Square developing yet another full-blown Final Fantasy title for the PS5, especially with everything already on its plate. The studio is currently juggling Final Fantasy XVI, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, and the Final Fantasy XIV PS5 port. For it to announce something like Final Fantasy XVII seems premature since FF16 doesn't even have a release date, and revealing another Final Fantasy Remake series sounds unlikely since Square has barely scratched the surface of Final Fantasy VII's. Technically, Square hasn't announced Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 yet, not officially. It's only passively mentioned its development and hasn't given it a spectacle reveal. So if the developer does have a major, never-before-seen, PS5, Final Fantasy title planned for E3, then Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 fits the bill, especially since Square would more than likely announce the game as a timed PS5 exclusive, just like Final Fantasy XVI. The announcement would also come right on the heels of Intergrade's release date, so its timing couldn't be better. If it's Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 or any other older Final Fantasy title's remake, it would be a win for PlayStation and its player base, and I think Sony is at the cusp of acquiring Square Enix, and it would be great for Sony to boost its exclusives catalog if Sony buys Square Enix and also Bluepoint Games for making separate projects or remakes and remasters of legacy titles. It is also rumored that Team Ninja, the famous Japanese developer behind titles like Ninja Gaiden and the Nioh series, is working on the unannounced Final Fantasy RPG game, which will be coming to fruition soon.
I'll kill you. If it's the last thing I do.
Moving forward, we have some news on Returnal, as fans of Returnal may be surprised to learn that the title was in development for 4 years before launch. Housemarque's latest game pushes players to the limit as they fight through swathes of dangerous aliens and crossfire. Despite Returnal's scope, it turns out that the team was working on it for many years leading up to release. With a release this past April 30th, the game is one of the first official PlayStation 5 titles. As a new property, some were skeptical if the game would be worthy of the next-gen price increase for PS5. However, multiple accolades and extensive usage of the console's main features saw Returnal establish itself as a definitive exclusive. The marketing director from Housemarque, Michael Haveri, gives some insight to the game's background. According to Haveri, not only did 4 years of solid development go into Returnal, but there was even some earlier concepting before that point. Players may remember that the team didn't show off Returnal until last year with the PS5's reveal. Even so, Haveri explains how the title was always planned to be platform agnostic from the beginning of development. From the interview, it sounds like the team was able to gain access to next-generation changes and possibilities early. Because of this, Haveri describes how the build from early on was a much different game than the launch version. Over time, Housemarque got more familiar with the technology behind PS5 and focused on improving the game accordingly. By not committing to a specific platform, the developers could tweak Returnal to be an experience of a greater scale. As a roguelike game, there can be expectations of cyclical gameplay to extend a typically shorter length. Though the game still embraces these tropes to a degree, Housemarque clearly put an extensive amount of time into crafting the game. With the immersive usage of PS5's DualSense haptic feedback and 3D audio, it seems like the developers made the right decision to launch on the newest generation. Of course, this news may leave some players scratching their heads as to the release date of Returnal. Even with the positive reception, the game launched with a series of bugs and glitches that Housemarque has been resolving afterwards. On top of that, one of these updates had the chance of corrupting saves, rendering them unsalvageable. For a game that was in development for over 4 years, it seems strange that damaging glitches like this made it through. Even so, the title has become a solid addition to the PlayStation 5 lineup and should continue improving post-launch. Returnal dev Housemarque proved that it's not just the Resogun studio and can create even bigger games in the future. Returnal developer Housemarque is on record as saying it wants to dispel the notion that it is a studio that only works on small games. To that end, marketing director Michael Haveri said the studio wants to make more games the size and scope of Returnal rather than some of the arcadey titles it worked on in the past. The PS5 exclusive, which released at the end of last month, is said to have some aspects of Housemarque's bullet hell formula of previous projects. On the other hand, Returnal has a different style and aesthetic compared to previous Housemarque games such as Resogun. In a recent interview with Game Reactor, Haveri laid out how he thinks his studio wants to move further away from some of its smaller projects of the past. One way he suggested the team might accomplish making more games the size of Returnal is to focus on one project at a time. Previously, the company has apparently usually been working on 2 games at once. While Haveri didn't completely rule out the idea that the company would work on 2 IPs at one time, he seems to prefer focusing on one at a time. The developer thinks Housemarque has the room to change up how it works thanks to the way it established itself with Returnal. In the interview, it didn't appear he liked the idea that the company was known as only doing arcadey games. However, the marketing director went out of his way to say that doesn't mean the company is going to only do games like Returnal moving forward. It appears he and others on his team are just happy they have a larger scale title to be known for. It also doesn't appear that Haveri, for one, wants to return to the smaller projects anytime soon. When asked about what he thinks the plans for his studio is, he said it might return to things like Dead Nation or Nex Machina 26 years in the future. While Haveri knows that his studio can work on all kinds of different things, he likes that it's focusing on projects that are larger and specifically geared to powerful consoles like the PS5. There are even some in the gaming community who think Housemarque's work on the PS5 and specifically the DualSense controller could inspire other studios to build what it did, and then try and take it even further. There's even been talk that the next God of War could use Returnal's innovations as a bit of a blueprint. Speaking of the game-changing DualSense controller, The Last of Us 2's DualSense haptic feedback properties have been improved thanks to the recent release of a DualSense firmware update. When the DualSense PS5 controller was first revealed, few had no way of knowing just how awesome the haptic feedback would be. Many assumed the worst and figured it would likely be more of a gimmick than anything, but this turned out to be far from the truth. PS5 games that utilize the haptic feedback draw the player in with newfound levels of immersion, but the experience was never really the same for PS4 games played in backwards compatibility mode. This includes Naughty Dog's The Last of Us 2, but it seems as though that might have changed recently thanks to a new firmware update for the DualSense controller. The thought of having to update a controller may seem strange to some, but it allows for improvements like this to be a reality. Naughty Dog's Kurt Margino, a co-director for The Last of Us 2, explains how this change came about. As it happens, the improvement to The Last of Us 2's haptic feedback comes entirely from within the controller. Margino explains that there weren't any changes made to the code in The Last of Us 2. Instead, the improvement that fans have noticed is a direct result of the firmware update that hit the DualSense controller recently. Going into more detail, Margino discusses how the DualShock 4 and DualSense controller use completely different mechanical methods to generate vibrations and rumble, making it difficult for PS4 games played on PS5 to properly read the directions from the game and make an appropriate response. Sony recently fixed this issue, providing a way for the DualSense controller to interpret the DualShock's rumble signals and recreate them. Since the two use different mechanical systems, this isn't as simple as just converting a file type, so it's certainly impressive. What's more, even those players that haven't played The Last of Us 2's new PS5 performance patch might start to notice a difference in all PS4 games when playing with a PS5 controller. The rumbling feel should be much more authentic to how it would feel on a DualShock 4 controller, resulting in a more immersive experience that aligns closer with what the developers intended. Players still won't be getting the full effect of the haptic feedback unless they play a PS5 version of a game, but this is definitely a great change that flew somewhat under the radar. There will no doubt be more changes like this in the future, so players may want to pay close attention to the next DualSense firmware update. Naughty Dog also made some statements on that they are looking into the architecture of the PlayStation 5 and its features. Their new sci-fi IP is in development and also a Last of Us 2 multiplayer. To push the hardware to the limits, the sequel to The Last of Us 2 going to be crazy. Up next we have some for the upcoming title Starfield. E3 2021, the Summer Game Fest, and a variety of other gaming events are coming in June, and one game seems to be an increasing point of focus. Bethesda's Starfield is consistently a topic of speculation and contention in recent weeks, as industry insiders reveal shifting plans for the sci-fi game. As is becoming routine, an insider has now revealed another exciting detail about Starfield. Bethesda apparently plans to reveal a specific release date for Starfield during E3 2021. Today's revelation comes from Bloomberg reporter Jason Schreier, who has delivered substantial information regarding Starfield in the past week. Schreier responded to a claim on Twitter that Bethesda was going to reveal a generic 2022 release window at E3 2022, clarifying it was incorrect. Rather, instead of sharing a release window for Starfield, Bethesda will be specific and will share an exact release date during E3 2021. There will be no ambiguity regarding just how long fans will have to wait. The confusion stemmed from a previous tweet shared by Schreier on Thursday. In that tweet, Schreier told his followers that Bethesda was planning to tease a release for Starfield at E3 2021. He then said, that date is in late 2022. So even though Schreier did say Bethesda would share a release date, the late 2022 description led some to believe a release window would be shared instead. That's now said to be incorrect. It's easy to understand why some Bethesda fans would be predisposed to not believing a specific late 2022 release date for Starfield would be announced. Most video game fans understand that game development can lead to many unexpected adjustments and delays. Announcing a release date so early denies Bethesda flexibility, something everyone in the industry is wary of anymore. Perhaps Bethesda is just that confident that Starfield will arrive by its rumored late 2022 release date. Perhaps Xbox believes it's just that important for fans to have a specific release date in mind despite the risks. Or perhaps Schreier has incorrect information, though that seems unlikely considering the consistency of his reporting on leaks. It's ultimately just an odd situation and an odd decision. As for when Xbox and Bethesda fans will find out what's in store for Starfield with certainty, the game all but confirmed for E3 2021. To be more specific, it would be announced during Xbox's E3 2021 keynote event. A date for the event has yet to be announced, but E3 itself starts on June 12, so expect the presentation then or around then. It is also said that it will be getting a fall launch window. So let's be straight, we don't know exactly what type of game Starfield is, and Xbox guys are hyping up the game a lot. To be honest, we cannot get excited without knowing anything about the game, or how it plays, and it is a new IP. Keep your expectations low and let the games do the talking. Bethesda Game Studios is actively working on two previously revealed projects in the form of Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6. However, it seems as though the studio behind classic games like Skyrim and Fallout may be working on a third, unannounced project. What that project is remains to be seen, but a recently discovered job listing does indeed suggest that Bethesda is working on something besides what's already been announced. As spotted by Pure Xbox, ZeniMax is hiring a server engineer for Bethesda Game Studios to work on an unannounced game. The job listing doesn't give any clue as to what the game is, but since Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6 have already been announced, it seems likely that the job is for a third project that's in the works. Unfortunately, it's impossible to say with certainty what exactly Bethesda is working on, and so any guesses are purely speculation at this time. The job listing is specifically for Bethesda's office in Texas, which previously worked on Fallout 76. This could indicate that this unannounced project is not being handled by the main Bethesda Game Studios team. For those who may be unaware, Bethesda's Austin location has mainly been focused on online functionality, so it's possible that this project is a new, online multiplayer game based on one of the company's franchises. Then again, Bethesda's Austin studio could instead be providing support to the main team for a game that they're working on. But again, all of this is just speculation. There is very little to go off of when it comes to this newly discovered job listing, and it's unlikely that fans will learn anything new anytime soon. Starfield isn't even out yet, and The Elder Scrolls 6 is expected to launch after Starfield. Those two games should do a lot to occupy Bethesda's time for the next decade or so, with maybe one other new game from the studio to release in the latter half of the decade. As far as Starfield goes, Bethesda fans may actually get to play the game sooner rather than later. Starfield's release date is rumored for late 2021, with the game expected to get a full unveiling at Microsoft's E3 2021 press conference. Whether or not that comes to pass remains to be seen, but with E3 right around the corner, Bethesda fans don't have much longer to wait. The Elder Scrolls 6 release date will likely be years from now, well after Starfield launches, and so fans of the studio shouldn't expect to learn more about any of its other future projects for some time. Moving forward, with Grand Theft Auto V releasing on PS5 and Xbox Series X later this year, Rockstar Games is bringing the game into the new generation. Grand Theft Auto V was originally released on PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2013, and has since been ported to PS4 and Xbox One. Rockstar is working on bringing the game to new consoles with all the expected upgrades, and it probably means that GTA 5 will continue to be its focus for some time. As much as gamers would love to hear some news on Grand Theft Auto 6, it's unlikely to happen. GTA 5 looks set to be Rockstar's priority for some time to come. Grand Theft Auto 5 will launch on PS5 and Xbox Series X on November 11, 2021. It's expected that the new version will bring 4K resolution, but no other upgrades have been detailed as of yet. On the same day, GTA Online will launch as a standalone game. Rockstar seems to be very much caught up with Grand Theft Auto 5 and the online mode at the moment. The next generation versions of the game will likely bring Rockstar further financial success. With so much focus being set on the current iteration of GTA, it makes sense that gamers won't see news on Grand Theft Auto 6 for a while. With the new version of Grand Theft Auto 5 releasing, gamers can expect an elevated level of popularity for the title. GTA 5 is already extremely popular on current platforms, but this is expected to be boosted with the new release. Players on PS5 and Xbox Series X will be undoubtedly eager to see what the new version brings to the new console generation. As much as players may desire some official information on Grand Theft Auto 6, it's unlikely to happen anytime soon, thanks to GTA 5's continued popularity, which is likely to be surging again. The new GTA 5 will also probably mean a big surge in sales for Rockstar. Grand Theft Auto 5 already has crazy lifetime sales, but the new games will see Rockstar earn more financial success. GTA 5 has remained consistently popular since its release in 2013, with its sales and player base going from strength to strength in the years since. As a proven tentpole product for Rockstar and Take-Two Interactive, players can expect that GTA 5 will sell well on its new platforms. Continued strong sales for the latest Grand Theft Auto may dissuade Rockstar from pushing ahead with GTA 6 and could see the developer maintain it as its main priority. With Grand Theft Auto 5 continuing to sell well, Rockstar might not be too incentivized to go full steam ahead with GTA 6. Most gamers predict that the new versions of the game will sell well, and Rockstar will probably want to maximize its potential profits and increase its fanbase. This would mean continuing to focus on GTA 5, and any official news on a sequel could take away from further success with the fifth main series installment. I mean, they have been milking GTA 5 for 8 years, and it's time for a new installment in the series. As our final topic, 4 class action lawsuits filed against CD Projekt due to Cyberpunk 2077's faulty launch have been combined into one court case. Cyberpunk 2077's launch was catastrophic, and investors and Sony weren't happy with the game's launch state. Cyberpunk 2077 released with a number of bugs and AI issues, even for PC players who were able to circumnavigate the brunt of the problems. After multiple class action lawsuits were filed against CD Projekt for Cyberpunk 2077's turbulent launch, 4 cases are now being rolled into one lawsuit tackling the same concerns. For many PS4 and Xbox One players especially, the game would fail to render NPC faces or completely crash altogether. Cyberpunk 2077 was nearly unplayable in a lot of cases, so CD Projekt Red announced players could get refunds for it, but this wasn't in line with Sony's refund policy. The console manufacturer ended up completely pulling Cyberpunk 2077 from the PlayStation Store, where it still cannot be purchased. Investors were upset with the way CDPR handled Cyberpunk 2077's release as well as its damage control, leading to several class action lawsuits against CD Projekt. Most of these lawsuits detail similar claims, including that CDPR misled investors and the public on the state of the game, leading to its inevitable downfall. The removal of Cyberpunk 2077 from the PlayStation Store is also cited as a key reason for the severe plummet in CD Projekt's stock prices. These 4 class action lawsuits were filed in United States courts will now be rolled into one massive case, an announcement from CD Projekt details, as they mostly encompass the same claims. One argument from representing party Rosen law firm states that Cyberpunk 2077 was virtually unplayable on last-gen consoles upon release, while PC players had mostly high praise for the game. As a result of these concerns at launch, Sony, Microsoft, and CD Projekt offered full refunds for the game, causing financial harm. Much of this was largely due to CD Projekt's false statements and lack of transparency with the public and its investors. Aside from Cyberpunk 2077's nearly unplayable state and a slew of bugs, many gamers felt misled by Cyberpunk 2077's marketing overall. It was previously revealed that the E3 2018 demo was fake for the purpose of show, with many of the features highlighted not making an appearance in the final game, resulting in disappointment from fans who were highly anticipating the game. Previously, CD Projekt stated that it would take vigorous action to defend itself against these allegations. The current state of Cyberpunk 2077 still isn't looking great, with the developer continuing to patch out old bugs, resulting in new issues for PC players. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and if you want to contribute for the growth of the channel, the link to my PayPal in the video's description and in the channel banner. As my resources are very limited, donations are always appreciated, and it can help me to create more contents and share news consistently, and could open doors for live streams, game playthroughs, podcasts, merch, etc. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then, from SMPV it's goodbye.